Orderly exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Let's take a look now at the Central Bank of Nigeria's Monetary Policy Committee meeting, which will hold today, starting today actually. It's the fourth in the year 2024. So far, the CBN has had 3 MPC meetings, and in all of the 3 MPC meetings, we've seen an increase in rates, that is the monetary policy rate, which is the benchmark interest rate in Nigeria. We've seen it increase from 22% to 24.75%, and then it was left at 26.25%. So as the CBN sits today, the CBN MPC sits today for a meeting. It will run from today until tomorrow. What is the expectation of economists, of Nigerians? Would rates remain at 26.25%? Would it increase by, I don't know, what basis points they would increase it by? Or, as Mokhtar Mohammed is predicted, would there be a rate cut? Because Mokhtar actually did say that the trend for countries that have been dealing with high inflation rates for now has been to cut rates. So will the CBN follow the trend, go in line with some of these countries and reduce rates? Well, we'll find out from our next guest, Julius Afolabi, who will be joining us in a while. I need to just get into Femi's brain right now and find out what he's thinking regarding the MPC meeting, which is starting today. So we've seen a progression in terms of rates, increased from 22% to 24 to 26, and all of this have been in bids to reduce the inflation in Nigeria. But we've seen that inflation in Nigeria has not abated. So what are your thoughts? What do you expect the NPC to do?
Yeah, you're putting me on the spot now. You want to turn me to a CL prophet. But interestingly, today is the day we've been waiting for investors, people in the business communities. When it comes to the time for MPC meeting, it's usually much anticipated, and it's starting today, 10 a.m. It's taking place at the CBN headquarters in Abuja from now till tomorrow. So where you have all the experts in Nigeria coming together in the company of the CBN committee to see what they can do to manage inflation. There are different angles to these, different analysis. There are people who feel it is time for the CBN to think about a cut rate. Now, if you look at the pattern globally, let's take example from the US. Just last week, US also the US Federal Reserve had to cut rate, because looking at the inflation at the US, it at 2.5%, even though the target is 2%. But because of the development with the management of inflation, the U.S. Federal Reserve was emboldened to back on what we call cutting rates. So also back on England and the rest of them, even in Canada. So if Nigeria is going to take an extension from that, looking at the last figure released by the Nigeria Bureau of Statistics as regards inflation is about 32.15% now as of August. So there's a reduction in terms of inflation. So there are those who argue now that inflation rate is dropping, maybe on paper. For some, they might not agree it's dropping in reality when you look at the prices of goods and services and the hunger in the land. But if we're going to draw some reference from the statistics released by NBS in August, or for August, that's 32.15%. Maybe the CBN could be in a position to now thinking of cutting rate. And like Muta have said, I also want to subscribe to that. There's tendency for CBN to cut rate because the essence of tightening up the economy, if you look at it globally, is to curtail inflation. And if you're making progress with your inflation policy and you discover that you are getting the figures right, which is what happened in the case of the US, the US inflation, they're getting it right, Interestingly, they have a single-digit inflation. We are battling with double digits. But if you look at the appreciable progress within a month, the figure released in July and that of August, you will discover that there's a little progress. So maybe that could embolden the CBN to now think of, okay, cutting rate this time around. Then there's also peculiarity.
You don't need to ask me why I'm smiling.
We'll get back to it. I could preempt why you are smiling. But the interesting thing is, which is another side to it, that the theories or the economic theories or the approach to tackling inflation in other climes seem not to be working here. And if you look at the peculiarity of our economy here, there are other factors. For people in the US, consumers in the US, they have access to basic things like health infrastructures, things like that. Health loans and some other things that take care of their basic things. Credit system and all that. But if you look at the peculiarity of our economy, there are those who argue that it seems that the global theory doesn't work in Nigeria. But the truth is, when it comes to containing inflation in Nigeria, it's not just about tightening up the economy. There are other factors like the exchange rates, which will also have to be looked into. Then you also have to look at the cost of production. So there are two things that might likely take place if I'm to be a seer now, a prophet. It's either the CBN increases or reduces, but I want to go with the fact that they should reduce this time around.
Okay.
But, the decision is left.
If you're going with the option of CBN reducing, and it happens at the same time that the Central Bank of England is in reduced rates, and the Fed have cut rates in the US, and Canada too has cut rates, doesn't that seem like a bad wagon thing?
No, not really a bad wagon, because you also have to look at the effect of that on our economy. When you increase the benchmark interest rate, you are increasing the cost of borrowing. And so for investors in Nigeria,
that it comes with, sorry to cut in there, but agree that it comes with lots of benefits. But these benefits could have been given to the economy a long time ago, or even before we got to this point. Imagine increasing rate from 22% and then to 24.75%. And when people thought, this is too much, taking it up higher to 26.25%. And then now cutting. We don't know if they'll cut, but just assuming that the CBN actually, at the end of the MPC meeting, cuts rates to maybe 24, take it back to 24.75. However, I think that, when you were talking about, if you look at the figures, the inflation rates before and what it was at the end of August, it shows that there's been some progress. Now, there's some curiosity as to how this inflation figures are calculated and how they arrived at, because if you check the price of commodities, goods and services from the month of July to August and now till September, the prices doesn't quite suggest that inflation has dropped, which takes us to the second conversation we'll be having, the methodology of calculating inflation and GDP rates in Nigeria. Is there a need to question that?
Now, if you look at the appreciable progress we're talking about, it's just months on months. Maybe we're yet to see the impact when it comes to year on year.
If it's month on month and there's some significant decline or reduction,
but I get
it should actually translate in the goods.
Yeah,
in the price of goods, even if it's by 5 naira.
I get the point you're making. But this thing is a combination of several factors. You must understand. If you're going to have that impact on the prices of goods and services, it might take a while, but we must understand that the peculiarity of our economy is different from any other economy.
Oh yes,
like the advanced economies. In fairness to the CBN, there's wisdom in tightening up economy when you're battling with high inflation. It's the global practice. Look at what happened in the US.
Economics?
No, according to economic theories, these are things or template, what you call monetary policy, that have been deployed by the CBN to manage inflation. And it's not peculiar to Nigeria. UK did that. The US did that. It's just that
using the principles.
Exactly.
The known principles of economics.
For 4
years,
the US didn't embark on cutting spree until after 4 years, which was done last week. So you can understand that there's wisdom when the CBN has decided to increase benchmarking.
I like to test that wisdom by asking this question. So the US that had a single-digit inflation, not even up to 10%, less than 5%, had to wait for 4 years, and they kept increasing rates. So Nigeria had double-digit inflation that kept growing month after month, yet still had to use that same principle. Pardon me.
So
Could you explain the
you need
reason?
to understand, first of all, Nigeria doesn't operate in isolation. Principles does not have boundaries. Whether you are in US or wherever you are, economic theories, they have
Femi, I'd like to take you
ideal.
off the hot seat.
However, that's the starting point. Principles have ideal. However, there are peculiarities when it comes to situation. That's why it's applicable to whoever you're applying that to. That's why they say for every rules there are exceptions.
Okay.
Now, when it comes to globally, tightening up the economy to curtail inflation sounds like something you need to do, especially when you're battling with double-digit inflation. Now, in the case of Nigeria, there are peculiarities, which is why people are saying it's important for Nigeria to have its own templates when it comes to managing inflation and even rebasing the GDP. Because most of the time, in other clients, when you talk about GDP, it tells you how robust your economy is, but it doesn't connote strength. It could tell the size of the economy. But in peculiarity related to Africa, it doesn't look at the fact that your economy is big, doesn't mean your economy is strong
Or productive.
or productive.
All right.
So that's where the peculiarities come in. And that's why it's important as a country. It's also important for CBN to look at other factors, the issue of exchange rates, cost of production, then the FX issue. These are factors that also influence inflation pattern in
Let's have a handshake. You've done well. You've done well on the hot seat, but let me take it away from you now to a guest who joins us virtually, Julius Afolabi. Thank you for joining us. Good morning. You must have been listening to the conversation. What are your thoughts on the MPC meeting, which starts today, the 4th in the year? We can't hear you, Julius. I think you need to unmute your device so we can hear you clearly. There's still no audio coming from you. Could you please unmute your device? All right. So the question I asked before the break is, this is the 4th MPC meeting in this year. So the CBN so far will be having its 4th MPC meeting. And from the 3 that have been had, the interest rates have been increased. What are your expectations? What do you see the CBN coming up with at the end of this meeting?
The issue of rebasing. Can you hear me? If you can hear me, let me know. So the issue of rebasing actually is to face reality and stop living in denial. We can see very well that the economy is in a very bad shape, and is the responsibility of leadership to be able to hold these strategic meetings and be able to give considerations to the major factors and not leverage on the minor factors. That is one of the basic things that we must understand. So I expect that this meeting is going to come up with policies that are going to improve the infrastructures that will enable the gross domestic product. Yeah, that's the GDP, right? And then the hyperinflation is, we'll call it hyperinflation, is almost a galloping inflation because the prices of goods and services are not smiling. That is the sincere truth, which is affecting every other sector. So rebasing is important. The last time that Nigeria undertook a rebasing was in 2010, right? And global rebasing simply means that you looking at the prices of things and looking at the indices, the business indices that form the gross domestic product of the economy, which is very, very important because a lot of things have changed between 2010 and 2024. Given the rapid evolving kind of change that we experience today, the influx, the introduction, the emergence of new technologies and new economies as well. So a lot of things have changed in the business sector that requires inclusion in order for us to be able to arrive at what? A realistic gross domestic product. That is very important. And for you to be able to do that, there's the need for you to have accurate data, updated data. And that's one thing that I think that the government needs to take into consideration. Do we have a robust data that can enable us get the accurate indices? The major reason why the meeting is important and looking at the economy with a rebasing eye or from a rebasing perspective is the fact that there is the need for us to increase investor confidence and to have economic accuracy, which is very, very important, right? Very, very important and basic. So if we don't have that accuracy from robust and complete comprehensive data, there is no way we can recalibrate the economy in order to recalculate the interest rate that is visible. Like I said, leadership willingness is very important. That's why I said the outcome of the meeting is going to be dependent on what leadership priority and perspective is. What the public expects is a totally different ballgame with what leadership considers as priority. Because in developing economies that have suffered hyperinflation, what eventually happened was them dollarizing their economy, having to sacrifice their own present currency in order to adopt more stable currency. In the meantime, depending on when the leadership decides to be able to repair its deficiencies and now matured enough to be able to handle the economy, then they can now do a partial restoration or complete handover of the economy. And that takes a lot. So this is what I expect all the economists and the juggernauts and the business-minded people that are going to be sitting down with in the meeting today to discuss at length and look at things from the critical perspectives, looking at what presently constitutes our gross domestic product. Is our indices, are they truly reflecting the changes in the economy since 2010? What is going to be our new base year, right? What's going to be the new base year? If the new base year is going to be 2020, 2022, 2023, or 2024, of course, definitely it can be 2024. If it's going to be 2020 now, and 2020 is a major destruction. Yeah, it's a year of, universal disruption. So from 2020, after the COVID, a lot of things have happened and business has shifted gears, which has not been put into consideration in a lot of ways in our economy. So I feel that these are the intricacies we need to look at. What are the new economy? What are the new business sectors that have come? What are the changes that have happened over time that has not been included in our calculation? Do we have the robust data in order to be able to measure accurately what our numbers should be? Is our gross domestic product today a true reflection of the current economy? Because when there's an imbalance, definitely you cannot tackle inflation. The moment there's an imbalance in what is operational, what is functional in the business environment that is not captured in your numbers and in your indices, then you will know very well that's what you cannot tackle that particular inflation. And nobody wants to go take on the risk of having to sacrifice or dollarize the economy, because I pray we don't get to that level. That would be dependent on leadership willingness to be able to take the steps that it ought to, because the changes in prices, the way they are going, well, I will wait until I see the outcome before we can say more on that.
All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Afolabi, good to see you once again.
Thank you very much.
All right, let's look at one of the critical issues that will be on the table for this kind of meeting, very crucial and important meeting, is the issue of inflation rate in Nigeria. You almost talked about it, but I still wanted to shed more light on it. You will observe that consistently the CBN has decided to increase benchmark interest rates with the spirit of managing inflation in Nigeria. I would like you to do an assessment of that template. So far, will you consider that to be a necessary template for Nigeria, looking at the peculiarity of our economy? And what are the issues here? If you look at what is playing out in the US, using the same template, they are getting results. Now in Nigeria, it seems to us that there's still more to it. So what should be done to ensure that the inflation rate or the inflation management in Nigeria is actually getting the needed result and also in reality playing out on the prices of goods and services?
Well, number one, it's first of all, leadership willingness. You can't compare adherence to principles and policies in the United States and that of Nigeria. It's a far cry, right? There is the respect and recognition of law and economic policies than compared to that of Nigeria. Now, look, two people can have the same tool, but their understanding of the tool and the willingness to abide by the undertaking, the underlying principles of that tool, right, in fairness to the peculiarity of their environment matters to the result. Getting result is totally dependent on status reality, required capacity, and commitment to execution. Those are the three functions that determine getting results. In the US, you find out that they have, just like you laid the foundation during when you were on the hot seat, that in a single digit inflation economy, and they're applying this particular template and they're seeing results, you can see that the effect is minimal. You can't compare that with a double-digit inflation-driven economy and expect to get the same kind of result within the same time. You see, one of the things that Nigeria as an economy lacks is stress test. We don't stress test a particular template before we put it into play. Most of the time, we are doing trial and errors, putting the economy at jeopardy while we are testing policies that are not peculiar, that are not in consonance with our peculiarity, right? You may share similar characteristics with another economy, but the leadership practice and management, for instance, Zimbabwe had this kind of challenge, which they had to, that was typically because of their political instability, leadership failure, and public spending. They had to stop printing money and dollarize their economy in order to get stability. That was the only way in which they were able to call the personal and the grievous appetite of the politicians, right? That was the only way to do that. You find out that our, what do you call it, investment management, even if you have FDI in Nigeria, what about the management? What is the picture of our public spending? You know, inflation comes as a result of what the amount of money in circulation and the amount of goods that it can acquire. What the affordability quotient is, that's really what inflation is all about. It was Ojukwu that once said that inflation is going to the market with basket of money and coming with food in your pocket, which is supposed to be the reverse order. So you see, public spending to a large extent can have pertinent effect on inflation. If you use these templates and all things being equal, our practice is the same, we can't get results. Until there is an internal change in leadership mentality, structure, and commitment, we can't have the results that the template should produce. And now tell me, how do you stabilize, how do you benchmark interest rates when all the realities that are supposed to follow suit are working contrary to that particular benchmark? You can't fix a particular price for a particular commodity that is supplied, is in short supply and has high demand. What do you expect? You can't sell at that price. For instance, look at the price of fuel. The fuel is not available. Those who have capacity to buy are afraid of buying because they don't know the price at which the fuel is going to be sold. So we don't have fuel. And then the lack of its supply, even though it's available, but you don't know the price at which you are going to buy, people can't go back. Okay, this morning, ordinary pure water, the price had changed this morning compared to yesterday night. Can you see now? So somebody that brought 100 units of items goes to the market this morning, can't buy back that unit of item. And you want to tell me you have to fix price. If you fix price for the manufacturers and the price, the cost of production has increased, how do you expect them to survive? They will just shut down. And the more they shut down, the more it is aggravating and amplifying the interest effect, the inflation effect in the society. So we are going through a time where if we don't carefully manage and be ready and willing to be able to suppress our personal appetite and share and check and shrink ourselves of personal interest and look at public patriotism, there's no way in which we are going to make a headway. Rather, what we'll have a meeting, we'll have a template, but the realities on ground are fighting back at the templates that we have created. So you just have an escalation. So those are the issues that must be in place. Like I said, a lot of things have changed in the business environment that are not captured in our present reality. in our present figures. So you can have GDP figures that are not a true representative of the consumer price index. So you can see it. So when you have figures that are not representing reality, it is just like a facade. So we can't actually say this template can work until the willingness and the readiness of government to be able to curb its public spending, look into areas that have entered into our economy that has not been captured, the areas that have been like Zimbabwe had to reduce their public spending, had to increase their investment in agriculture, which was their green area that could boost the GDP. Now, so what are the areas that should boost Nigeria's GDP? Nigeria, it does not lack human and capital resources. Nigeria simply lacks the willingness to be able to implement what should be done. So I think these are the critical issues that we expect that will be addressed in this meeting if we want this template to be a picture of reality and curb the growing and the frightening inflation rates.
All right. We've seen that according to the statistics revealed by the NBS, so inflation rates seem to have dropped from what it was some months earlier to what was released for the month of August. It's now 32.1% or 32% thereabout. So looking at that and the inflation rate itself, which the CBN has tried to reduce by increasing the MPR, which is the benchmark interest rate. Now, if we go by that and what had happened in other countries, say in the US, England, and Canada, we've seen that once inflation began to drop, at the end of the day, cut rates. Do we see the CBN doing same? And looking at the inflation rates that this NBS actually announces, can we say that's a reflection of reality?
Obviously, the answers are staring you and I in the face. The statistics shows reduction. Reality does not picture that. That means there is an imbalance. There's a gap in the two. Now, you have talked about Canada and the US. I have said it, and I'm going to repeat it. The leadership recognition of the power of principles and law, effective law, is one thing. The leadership willingness to be able to adjust what the reality is and the data is. You know, in a nation where you have comprehensive data, it's easy to plan. Remember, when you have you have comprehensive data, it's easy to plan because your plan and your results are predictable based on data. But if your data is faulty, there's no way you can get good results. So on what basis is the inflation figures dropped? In reality, ask Nigerians today. Now check it. What prices have reduced? What prices? What items in the consumer pricing index? What items in that category have really experienced the reduction in prices? You know, there are what I'll call premium products or universal products, right? A product that is readily used, universal applicability and usability within the economy. When such a product is affected, what happens is that particular is a major product that is a driver, a catalyst to other products, just like fuel. For instance, if the price of fuel comes down, you don't need a prophet or a magician to tell you that the prices of goods and services will drop. Why? Because it is a foundation, it's a catalyst product for every other thing. It drives a lot of the part of the economy. So when you have products like that, have their prices come down, inflation will automatically come down. So the question I'm asking is that what items were measured in order to be able to arrive at the statistics that NBC has provided for Nigerians? Now, if you're looking at minor products and not major driving products in the economy, you are not going to get the right indices. You will be publishing numbers that are not representing the reality of people. People will keep crying. It will be a facade. That's an economic facade. In accounting, it's called creative accounting, where the papers show that you are actually blossoming, but you are a bleeding economy. So you see, so the items that constitutes the measurement, when the consumer price index is based on, the base year, what items constitute that calculation? That is what will determine the index. That is what will be the basis on which the interest rate will be calculated and benchmarked. So what are the items that constitute the calculation that supplies that indices, right? So those are the critical things we should look at. It's possible for you to use the items that will lower the inflation in order to have it public, you understand, to have to give and to cast a perspective on the general public that, okay, inflation has come down. It would only reduce agitation, public agitation. But in practical reality, when you go to the market, you will see that the reactions are not different, right? So those are media management strategies, which is very possible, right? It can be done where you have those kind of publications in order to reduce public agitation, right? But then in reality, it's a far cry. So the basic thing is that what are the driving indices? What products, what items on the gross domestic product data that we have is responsible for that data? So where you have accurate in Canada and in the US, they have complete and comprehensive data. Do we have such? Does Nigeria have the comprehensive number? Will we say we have the right population statistics of this country? Do we have the total capture of economic sectors, businesses are captured that can supply us, can give us predictable tax income? Do you understand? So these are the things that are raw materials for predicting results.
All right, so if this is the position of things and the federal government is planning to adopt a global methodology in calculating inflation and rebasing GDP, what would that mean at the end of the day? Remember that there was a time when for calculating unemployment rates, the NBS was using a kind of method, and after a while it changed that and came up with the unemployment rate at 4% after the previous unemployment rate was around 30%. And Nigerians screamed like, what could have happened, and explained that it's just a change in the methodology. So if Nigeria is changing or adopting a global methodology now in calculating inflation and GDP rate, does that seem like it's going to be a change in numbers and not actually a change in the inflation itself, as well as what would happen to curtail the growth of the inflation?
Sincerely, we can't deceive ourselves. The sincere truth is what you have already established, that changing a method might change the figures, but may not be a representative of reality. We can have a national, feeling, and then we can have a global face. There's a way they will see you outside, just like somebody who has not eaten and is properly dressed. When he goes out, there is a public perspective of him, but at home, he knows what is back home with him. You understand? So we can globalize our numbers, our method, right, in order to be able to have international reputation management, kind of. But in reality, what we are experiencing at home is not a true reflection of what they see. Do you understand? And that would be a misrepresentation of the national reality. Now, the effect is this, that the foreign counterpart will be dealing with you based on the global perspective. And that could be further amplifying the effect on this. Imagine that you are getting a loan at 4% based on statistics. But when you bring the loan, you have collected several millions of dollars. But when you come back home, the value of that money is nothing compared to what they see it as. They will see it as a substantial amount that could probably complete a particular project or execute a particular project based on the numbers with which you use. Right? So, but when you come back home and you break it down into reality, right, you'll find out that the money is not as big as you thought it was. That is the risk. right? Just like now you have, why do we have to do, like as a professional, even though you are a chartered accountant in Nigeria, if you have to go to the United States to practice, you will have to do some courses, right? In order for you to be able, what is that doing? That is trying to help you marry your knowledge in this economy and in that particular economy to understand how it works in that particular economy. That is like what we call compatibility, right? So you have to do compatibility course in order for you to be able to fit into that particular environment. So that's what happens. So when you have that global method, it might bring down our numbers, right? The numbers only help us to interface with the external environment, right? In the international scene. But in reality, when we come back home, the national experience will be at variance with the international representation of what it has. So you can see it's just, I'll look at it like a form of, like I mentioned, it's a package, it's not reality. So the effect is that it might worsen the experience. While our papers are showing this, you will be seeing that this is it. How did some organization collapse? Why? Because the paper representations were showing positive, but the actual reality was showing different things. So when a particular company is publishing profits, but in actual sense, the money is not there. So what happens? It will go down, definitely. So let's not deceive ourselves. It's better we sit back at home, look at the peculiarity of our environment before adopting a universal template. Find out what do we need to fix in order to be at par with those that are using it. So there is the need for that compatibility analysis before we can ascertain and say with confidence that we are adopting this method. It's not it's not like it's like trying to look rich, go broke trying to look rich. That's exactly how it is. So we are not trying to measure up. It's not a yardstick. It's not. There's no credit to the fact that Nigeria is also using the global method, while in real sense Nigeria has not done what it ought to do in order to be able to qualify for that global method. That's exactly how it is. That's the reality.
Right, interesting, Julia. So let's wrap up with these now. The meeting is expected to take place at the moment from now. You're aware that the benchmark interest rate is at 26.25% now. And when CBN increases benchmark interest rate, it also increases the cost of borrowing. And you might likely have what you call loan defaults. Now, would you expect with these examples or with this practice or development, would you expect the CBN to reduce benchmark interest rate this time around as we wrap up?
Now, this time around, reducing or maintaining the interest rates is going to be dependent on the reality on ground. It's going to be totally dependent on the reality on ground. You have to look at what exactly you have before you can determine whether what you're presently adopting is feasible to continue or to reduce. And now you have to go back and also say, if we reduce what the interest rate is, what are the likely effects based on the data that we have on ground? What is the data we have on ground? What is the reality speaking? If the cost of borrowing increases, definitely loan defaults will increase. What does that mean for the economy as a whole? What is the rippling effect, the multiplying effect on that particular snowball effect, right? So whether to increase or reduce coming from this meeting is going to come from the realistic consideration of what we actually have on ground. What are the items? What are the major sectors of the economy that when tackled, you know that these are pillars. And when we look at that and we measure what our decision is going to be, there's going to be an effective and practical effect. And that is going to determine whether we are to reduce or come to a midpoint. In best analysis, you will have three options. Either we reduce, we come to a compromise, or we increase. If in these three categories, what is going to be the effect and how long is it going to take for this to happen? These are empirical analysis that needs to be done, right? These are not just paperwork. These are is going to function based on practical data, real-time data, right? That is going to tell us, okay, if we reduce this, this was going to happen. Right now, what is the lending rate? What is the effect? What effect has it had since we changed? And that will be dependent on having true data. Now, if you have the true data of what the effect is when you increase it, now if you reduce it, given what has changed over time, what is going to happen? How long do you want to test this? What are the cushion effects that we have so that in the case of any form of emergency or overboard, what are we doing? What stopgap initiatives do we have? So these are ways in which economies are managed such that it doesn't catalyze into catastrophe within the economy. And it doesn't bring a total shutdown because a lot of things are getting agitated now and people are just managing it, right? So it behoves on a lot of thinking. What is on ground? What is the environment? What are the feelers that we have? Now, another thing is, how do we communicate what we want to do? Most of the time, we lack good communication with the public.
We're out of time.
Yes.
We agreed a lot of critical thinking is needed now by the CBN's MPC as it meets today and comes to a decision as to what the benchmark interest rates will be for the next months. Well, thank you so much for being our guest on the show today.
Thank you very much.
We've been talking with Julius Afolabi, who is a premium business coach, a value improvement strategist, and an author. And we're looking at the meeting, the 4th MPC meeting of the CBN starting today, as well as the plan of the federal government of Nigeria to adopt global methodology in calculating inflation rates and rebasing GDP. Let's see how that works out at the end of the day. We'll update you as the developments emerges. That's the show today. Thank you for watching. I am Blessing Eichie, and Market Insight comes up at 11. Follow us on our social media platforms at Stock News TV on Facebook, Instagram, on X. Leave a comment. Tell us what you think of the issues that have been discussed here today. Thank you so much. I'll see you tomorrow.
All right, the much awaited MPC meeting is going to start any moment from now. So the rest assured that for live update or development from that meeting, you can do a catch up on all our social media platforms. So you need to follow us for live coverage of that meeting. And don't forget some of the conversations we had earlier. You can also do a catch up on all our social media platforms. Early Exchange will always return bigger and better, and it will return tomorrow better. I am Femi Ayodele. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.
Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.